Welcome to episode 6 of Recipes Remastered. Joshua Wiseman has been laying waste to fast food establishments around the world without much of a challenge. So today I decided to remaster Josh's meatball sub. For my version, I focused on key changes to the bread and sandwich construction technique. In our taste test at the end of the video, we answer the question, have we made his meatball sub, but better? Let's talk about that. Hey everyone, I'm Ethan, a home cooking nerd who likes to find better ways to cook and share them with all of you. So today we're doing the meatball sub Recipes Remastered style, where we break it down, talk about the adjustments that I'll be making, and then finally do a side-by-side taste test. I love these videos because they help really hone in my preferences of what I like, and I actually get to taste two very good products completely side by side, and we get to learn how the cooking process affects them. So let's hop into the video and make some meatball hoagies. The meatball sub, or hoagie, is a sandwich made of 4 key components: the bread, the meatballs, the sauce, and the toppings. Let's break them down. Joshua uses a 60% hydration lean dough, which is shaped into a large baguette shape, scored and topped with Parmigiano Reggiano, then baked with steam. As we learned from Harold McGee, steam increases the rate of heat transfer from the oven to the dough, leading to more oven spring, a pretty key technique used here. Now, this type of bread is a little different from your typical sub or hoagie bread. More on that in just a bit. For the meatballs, he uses a pretty classic beef and pork blend with breadcrumbs, milk, Parmesan cheese, seasonings, and prosciutto. I really like the use of the parm and prosciutto, as these are foods high in free glutamate, the same as in powdered MSG, which impart the 5th taste known as umami, which is a savory, meaty taste and just makes food taste delicious. This is a perfect way to enhance those flavors in a meatball sub. For the sauce, another pretty classic preparation is used with simple flavorings of garlic and basil, and again I like the use of the pancetta, which provides some extra savory flavor. For Josh's toppings, he uses provolone cheese, which is great for melting, but has a mild flavor, so to up the flavor, Parmigiano Reggiano is added to provide a strong, nutty flavor. Finally, that sandwich is rounded out with some fresh basil. I mean, if you've had Subway before, you know they aren't packing much in the flavor department, and this sandwich is packed with flavor that blows Subway out of the water. Even though I think the flavors of this sandwich are pretty spot on, the main reason why I wanted to remaster this dish is because of the textural components. Let's talk bread first. For my first adjustment, I'll be using the hoagie recipe I shared on the channel a few weeks ago, which is a 65% hydration dough that uses milk instead of water, which characterizes it as an enriched dough. What's the difference? Well, enriched doughs are tender with a soft bite and do not really have a crisp crust. Take a look at the difference between the two breads. The lean dough is a crunchy on the exterior and quite chewy, whereas the hoagie rolls are much softer without that crunchy crust. I also added a few toppings to mine to replicate that Italian herbs and cheese roll from Subway. Now, this is preference at the end of the day, but I do much prefer the enriched rolls as they closely emulate what I'm used to getting in a sub or hoagie shop. Now, let's talk meatball portioning. Regardless of which bread you choose, I'm of the notions that meatballs should be in a single line in the hoagie roll. The reason why? Less rolling around. One thing Subway does well is that it provides a nice swaddle of bread around the meatballs so they don't go everywhere. If we put them 2 by 2, it kind of becomes much more awkward to eat. This kind of reminds me of when you run out of hot dog buns and your mom says to put it on a hamburger bun. It may still be bread and a hot dog, but don't anyone try to tell me that it's the same experience. So for my version, the hoagie rolls are in that classically thinner shape, and then once they are baked, I actually remove the upper portion so the meatballs sit nice and snug. Lastly, let's talk acid. Acid in the term of pickled chili peppers, that is. So this meatball sub is a pretty heavy sandwich with lots of bread, meat, and cheese, so in order to provide some contrast and avoid palate fatigue, a fresh ingredient should be added. Josh uses fresh basil here, and I will use it in mine as well, but in addition, I like to add some pickled chili peppers, as they not only provide a sharp sourness to work through the fattiness of the meat, but also provide a great crispness to round out the sandwich. Now, other options that could be considered are fresh lettuce, pickled onions, or parsley. Really important here is just to make sure you're adding some fresh component to this sandwich. Now, I've made some other tweaks and changes along the way, which are primarily just my preference, so let's walk through my version, and then we'll do the taste test at the end. We'll quickly breeze through the hoagie rolls since I already have a video on the science behind them, so make sure you check that out. Anyways, to start, get 260 grams of milk and warm it to roughly 100 degrees Fahrenheit to optimize yeast activity. To that, add 6 grams of yeast along with 8 grams of diastatic malt powder and stir to combine. Meanwhile, add 400 grams of flour, 10 grams of honey, 20 grams of olive oil, and 8 grams of salt to a large mixing bowl. Then you can pour in the yeast mixture and vigorously mix the dough with your hands until no dry flour remains in the bowl and a cohesive mass forms. Then you're just going to cover this and let it rest. Once rested, knead the dough for about 8 to 10 minutes, and I do advise setting a timer to make sure ample time is spent kneading so we get that gluten developed. Then you can just let that rest until doubled in size for about 45 to 60 minutes, though it could take a little bit longer depending on the yeast and room temperature of the dough. Once it's doubled in size, just punch it down and we're going to divide this into equal portions. I do roughly 175 grams each. Then using your fingertips, just press and stretch the piece of dough into a rectangle and then roll that up into a tight little ball and seal the seam on top. Add the roll to a baking sheet with some cornmeal over it. Then we're just going to shape the remaining hoagie rolls and let these proof for another 45 to 60 minutes until they're 1.5 to 2 times in size. With the rolls proof, using a razor or a really sharp knife, you're just going to score the hoagie rolls in one long slash at a 45-degree angle to allow for oven spring. Then you're going to add an egg white and water mixture and lightly brush this on the outside to give us a better crust. And then at this point, the only thing that I changed was I made a mix of equal parts oregano, Parmesan cheese, and red pepper to a bowl, mix that together, and then sprinkle that over the top to give us that kind of Italian herbs and spices bread. Lastly, bake the rolls at 375 degrees with steam for about 20 minutes in total until the crust is nice and golden brown and the internal temperature reaches 200 degrees Fahrenheit. You're going to let these cool completely on a rack, and these are some beautifully delicious hoagie rolls. Let's talk meatballs. For the meatballs, I kept them pretty basic for what I had on hand. So to start, crack 1 egg into a bowl and whisk that up. Then for the seasonings, I really just eyeballed these and added fennel seed, Parmesan Reggiano, red pepper flake, grated in some cinnamon, oregano, and crushed in a clove of garlic. Then for our salty ingredients, I did weigh these because we are essentially making a sausage, so I didn't want to oversalt them. So I used 10 grams of soy sauce, 3 grams of salt, and 3 grams of MSG. Now, the soy sauce and MSG are going to provide glutamate, which will up the umami flavor, but if you aren't using these, just use 6 grams of salt. Finally, add 30 grams of breadcrumbs and mix that all together. Then if it's looking a little bit dry, I add a splash of milk. Then finally, add the meat. I use the half pound or 227 grams of ground beef and 227 grams of ground lamb for no other reason than I thought it would be interesting to use instead of pork like I normally do. Now, the key here is to really mix these ingredients together until they're cohesive and start to stick. And then to form the meatballs, get a little bowl of water, splash it on your hands, and this will help it from sticking on your hands while you form them. Once formed, you can let these rest in the fridge or cook them right away. Set a cast iron over medium heat and crisp up on the sides. I shoot for at least 3 well-browned sides, though you could just do 2, you go for 4, really do whatever you want to. At this point, the meatballs aren't going to be cooked, but we'll finish them in the sauce. For the red sauce, I used a riff on Marcella Hazan's 3-ingredient sauce, except I added a couple of ingredients. Right after cooking the meatballs, pour in a can of crushed tomatoes, 4 tablespoons or 56 grams of butter, 1 shallot, 2 cloves of garlic, some Parmesan cheese, oregano, salt, and pepper. Then just give that a stir and let it simmer for about 10 minutes. Also, I know people may be worried about tomato sauce in my cast iron, but it's very well seasoned and it's only there for about 25 minutes in total with the meatballs, so it's really not an issue. After simmering for 10 minutes, add the meatballs to the sauce and let them simmer for about 8 minutes to let them cook. I like to pull mine out when they reach 150 degrees internal so they are still moist. No one likes a dry meatball. Lastly, I turn off the heat and add a handful of fresh basil leaves to stir in the sauce. I think it's time to assemble. First, slice the hoagie roll in half while maintaining the hinge. Then rip out the top portion of the bread so the meatballs can feel safe. Then I pop this under the broiler for about 60 seconds just to harden the crust a little bit to help stand up to the sauce. Once out of the oven, I rub some butter on the bread, followed by rubbing a raw garlic clove. It may not seem like much, but this provides a nice bump of garlic flavor, and this is actually the technique used for a classic bruschetta. Next, we slather a layer of sauce, followed by the 4 meatballs, rank and file, and a little more sauce on top. Add 2 slices of provolone cheese, or mozzarella would be good too, and place under the broiler until melted. Pull that out and hit it with another little sprinkle of parm, then add another layer of sauce to the top piece of the bread, followed by those pickled chili peppers. Lastly, hit it with some more fresh basil, and there we have it. Close everything up nice and snugly, and there we have how I would make a meatball sub. I'm mouth-watering all over again. Luckily, I have leftovers. Anyway, let's do our taste test. Everybody, it is taste test time, and I have this other Rode mic that's normally on my camera. My lav mic died, so hopefully this audio doesn't sound too bad, but we'll get it fixed for the next video. So let's give Josh this a try first. Really good sandwich. I'll try this one and then we'll compare and contrast them. All right, so as we started the video, both very delicious. Let's kind of walk through those 4 components. Starting off with the bread, which, as I said, was the big change that I wanted to make in this sandwich. Hands down, like, this hoagie style bread is just, it's like way better for me. This kind of reminds me of like garlic bread, which garlic bread is good as garlic bread, but I don't necessarily want it to be my sandwich for this. Instead, I love the soft chew of this. It holds together better, and this like really reminds me of like what you would get for a typical, you know, meatball sub or meatball hoagie if you ordered it out, which is why I really prefer this bread. Then we add the little, you know, herbs and spices on top with the red pepper, little oregano and Parmesan. The bread is just a clear winner for me across the board. As far as the meatball goes, both phenomenal meatballs. Like, there's one's not better than the other. I love the prosciutto use in Josh's. It's a killer meatball recipe. And like I said, mine's really good too. I typically don't have like prosciutto and things, so that's why mine is a little bit more simple. I typically have all these ingredients, minus maybe ground lamb or pork. I just had to pick up one of those. So that's why mine is kind of more on the simple side, just because that better reflects what I would actually have in the fridge on a day-to-day basis. I wouldn't have things like prosciutto to add to mine. But that said, if you do have it, go make Josh's meatballs. They're absolutely killer. As far as the sauce goes, again, both sauces are really good. I love simplicity in mine. Both these sauces are very simple, just garlic. I added some shallot to mine. I kind of followed Marcella Hazan's, but kind of tweaked it a little bit. Josh has used a very simple one, but instead of butter like my sauce, he uses olive oil. So with the butter, the big difference you're gonna get is it's gonna be a little bit more emulsified, a little bit more creamy, which I'm a fan of personally. But olive oil based sauces, I love them too. So the sauce is absolutely phenomenal. I also really like the pancetta in Josh's. Really good. Then that last key thing is really just the topping. So like I said, I love the acidity and crunch from something pickled in there, whether it's, you know, these spicy pickled chili peppers or maybe some pickled onions or banana pepper, something like that. I think that really helps round out the dish and kind of cuts through kind of the heaviness of the sandwich, because I mean, these are cheesy, they're really meaty, so I feel like adding that little bit of acidity, a little bit of crunch really helps round out the sandwich, compared to just using just basil and, you know, adding more parm and cheese. But all in all, these are both phenomenal sandwiches. Again, the big differentiator between the two is really just the bread. I really love the hoagie style bread on this, and that was kind of like the main big technique change that I wanted to make to mine. So that is how I would remaster the meatball sub. Now, Josh's is great, don't get me wrong, but this is the one that I'm making if I'm gonna make a meatball sub. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video. If you did, definitely drop me a like and subscribe. We'll keep this train rolling. I'm still super thankful for all of you for allowing me to make this my job. I mean, I got to spend like 6 hours in the kitchen today making meatball subs, and like I was just thinking, how many people get to say that is their job? So I appreciate every single one of you. I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.